What's going on, guys? My name is Brandon, and for today's welding project we're going to be building a trailer mounted speed sign. I'll explain it to you in a minute here. Let's get going. So here's what we're building, guys. This is a speed sign, and what the city uses this for is they usually mount this on like a pole, and it warns people of the speed limit in the area. What they want to be able to do is put it on a trailer so they can move it to different locations throughout the city. They've reached out to me to do this work, so that's what we're going to work on. But before we start it, I want to show you the sign. So here's the sign, and then on top of it there's a solar panel that actually charges a battery that's inside that sign. And all of this needs to be mounted on our trailer. Now the sad part of this is that I cannot build a trailer for the price that I can buy a trailer for. It's just the facts of it. I just can't do it. I can buy a trailer that I need to hold that sign for $299. I cannot buy the metal, the paint, the tires, the wheels, the axle, in the hitch, in the safety chains, in the wiring for that price. I just cannot do it. So for this project, we're going to be buying a trailer and assembling it, and that's what we're going to be doing next. Then we'll be on to welding. These are actually pretty good tires. They're Carlisle tires. They're all put together, hubs on them. Who doesn't like the smell of a new tire, huh? Don't new tires smell good? Love it. LED lights, safety chains and hardware, leaf springs, and 1 7/8 coupler. This actually looks like it's going to be pretty easy to put together, honestly. And I'm actually pretty impressed with the thickness of the material and how it's made. Get some bolts in it, make it a little bit easier, hold it together. So this is what the finished product looks like, and it's rated for 1,090 pounds. I think it's like 4 foot by 3 foot or something like that. But yeah, it looks pretty straightforward. I mean, they show you how all the pieces go. The metal's pretty thick. Let's check that out. Yeah, this is pretty thick stuff. Let's see. So it's thicker than 1/8 inch. It's thicker than 10 gauge. Not quite 3/16. So it's like what? Probably 12 gauge maybe. It's pretty thick stuff. Pretty heavy. So I'm just gonna look at the pictures and showing everything from the top down. The nuts go on the bottom side, and then everything that has a bolt that needs to go up through, the nuts go on the inside. So it'll be pretty straightforward. Not a lot of hardware, so it won't be hard to mess it up. And it's got all nylon locking nuts. So yeah, pretty decent kit. I mean, you could weld this if you wanted to after you bolted it, but it's not going to be necessary. I may even tie this together with a plate on top. I haven't decided yet, but we'll get it together, and then we'll kind of formulate our plan a little bit more as we go. But what I'm going to do for right now is I'm just going to loosely put everything together and get all the bolts in all of it. So far this process has been super easy. The hardest part really so far that I've encountered is just getting my hands into some of these tighter places. My hands are huge, but it can be done. Alright, so now the trailer is actually upside down. So this is the bottom of the trailer. So now we got it all tacked together, saying the next thing we got to do is put on the hitch assembly. And then we'll put on the spring perches. Oh guys, this is pretty easy. I'm super impressed with how simple this is. Normally things don't go together this easy for me. I actually had a slight change of plans. I'm going to just pull this hitch back off, and then I'm just going to snug up a few of the bolts on the trailer and square it up. If you've watched my pile trailer rebuild series, I explained in there how to properly set up and square a trailer frame for when you're welding it, but the same holds true also for this, which is going to be bolting it up. So I'll explain what I'm doing as I go, but I need to get the hitch off to do it. The reason that it's important to square up a trailer is if you don't, the trailer's not going to track right. Does that make sense? It's going to like crab walk down the road. You want the axles and the trailer frame and the trailer tongue all parallel with the vehicle. You don't want the tongue off at an angle while the trailer frame's this way and the axles are canted off. It's going to wear your tires out, and it's just, I think, not the right way to do it. So it only takes a few minutes to square your trailer up, and by doing that, like I say, it's going to make sure that it just tows better, it's going to tow nicer. And all you're doing is comparing measurements. So from this corner to that corner, it needs to measure the same as that corner to that corner. So to get this started, we kind of got to snug things up, because right now it's just, everything is just, it's way too floppy. We'd never be able to get a good measurement. So we're just going to slightly tighten it, not very tight though. Then we'll take some measurements and see where we're at. Yep, see, that's just a little loose right there. That'll be fine. I'm making it so just so the heads of the bolt move a little bit. See, like that, that's too sloppy. Yeah, that's good. Something like that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook the tape measure on the other side, and then I'm just going to take a measurement over on this side right to the corner. It's exactly 63 inches. Now we'll go to the other side and make sure it matches. It needs to, and then we'll know it's square. So the other side was 63. This side is 62 3/8. We need to move that half the distance of 5/8. So I'm going to move this just a little if I can. It's going to allow me to do it. Try that. We are now at 62 9/16. I come over to this side, 62 7/8. It's getting better. So with a little bit of messing around with it, guys, I got it to within a 1/16 of an inch, of square. So that's, I'm okay with that. That'll work. So now I'm going to go through, tighten everything up, and then I'll double check it again to make sure we didn't lose our square. Now that it's square, now we can put the hitch on and put on the spring purchase. So far, guys, I'm pretty impressed with this trailer. I was a little skeptical when reading the article because you can't feel it and see it and everything else. I mean, it looks like it's got a nice baked-on hard finish. It should last a while. And that's always a concern when you're buying something online like this, because you don't know what it is you're getting. You know, if you can't touch it and feel it and see it, it's a risk. But I'm impressed. Now I'm going to go around and snug up these hangers. This is kind of interesting how this goes on. This goes through like that. Nut on the inside. Then a bolt on the back. Like that. And like that. Well, that's pretty slick. Snug it up while I'm here. I've done pretty well to not have any leftover parts also, which is kind of nice. What about you guys? You guys impressed so far? I know I am. I know I keep saying it, but I'm still pretty impressed. So I've snugged up one of the bolts on the back of the hitch right here, but you can still see that there's a little bit of movement in this hitch. I can move it just a little bit either way. So when I was telling you that I got the frame square within a 1/16 of an inch and that was close enough and it didn't matter to get it any closer, because now we can adjust the hitch to run parallel with the axle. That'll get the final perfection on this. So all I'm doing is I'm hooking it onto the hitch. Then I'm measuring on a point at the axle, and I'm measuring 58.5. I'm just picking a reference point that I can duplicate on the other side. So I'm 58.5 here, and I am 58 and 7/16 here. So that means that I've got to go about a 32nd of an inch that way on the hitch as I tighten this up. So I just got to push it that way a 32nd and then tighten it down and recheck it. But that's not much. This hub had a little bit of rust on it, so I'm going to just spray it down with a little WD-40 and use some Scotch-Brite on it. Yeah, that'll be fine. Not a problem. It's all flipped over. I've got all the wiring done, and this is all complete. It comes with everything that you see here except for this tongue jack. We're going to put that on, but got the marker lights all on, and I've wired everything up. And it comes with a connector that you just crimp onto a wire. I never use that type. This is what that type of connector looks like. I'm not a big fan of these. So everything on this has been soldered together. All the connections to the lights, everything's been soldered and heat shrunk together. That's just how I prefer to do it, because I'm kind of like, solder is like a one and done thing. These are kind of, in my opinion, just like a quick get you by type thing, because what happens is moisture will get inside of this and then it will start to corrode and then you'll get a bad connection. So now the next thing we're going to do is we got to mount some like jack stands, so if the wind blows, this thing doesn't tip over. So I've got 3 total. We're going to put 2 on the back just like this, and then we're going to put 1 on the hitch right there. Let me show you. You just pull a pin and then it swings up out of the way. So although it seems like a good idea to put like this, I don't want it here, because what you'd have to do in order to swivel the jack up to fit it in here, you'd have to crank this all the way up. You'd have to, you know, suck it all the way up into here. So what I'm going to do, rather than do it that way, is I'm going to have it so that the foot is on the inside of the trailer over here. So no matter where you were to wind it up, it'll always be able to just swing up out of the way. So now that I know where I want it, what I have to do is I've got to mark out on the metal where this is going to be welded, so I can actually grind away all the paint. Yeah, so now I know this right here, we got to grind the paint all the way around that so we can weld it. And to take off that paint, all I'm using is a 60 grit flap disc. So now that I got it all ground off, then I just held it up there and I put it exactly where I wanted it, so I know where I need to clamp it so I can weld it up. But if you look here, you see how this has like a little snap ring around it? That'll allow me to take off this back plate right here. Then I can just clamp the back plate to the trailer and get the jack right out of the way, so we're not spattering it with weld. So let me get some snap ring pliers and we'll pull that snap ring right out of there. There we go. There. Got it started. I should be able to just work it around now. There we go. See, now, take that right off. This piece to the trailer. Now I'm just going to line up my marks here so I know where I want it to go, and then clamp it to it. And to weld that on, I'm going to be using my Hobart Handler 140. I'm using 30 thousandths flux core self-shielded wire. So we go over to our chart and we see that we're welding steel, flux core self-shielded, 30 thousandths wire, and we go over and we're looking at 10 gauge, and it says to set it for 3 and 45 as the beginning setting, and that gets us pretty close. This welder runs pretty true to what it says. So 3 and 45, we'll start there and see how that goes. What I got, guys, I've got it all clamped up. I've got my ground hooked to my clamp. I've got my $60 DIY welding fume extractor vent hood. If you haven't seen that, check out that episode. This is a great way to remove exhaust welding fumes out of your workshop. And I've put down a welding blanket around my work surface here, so that way I don't have to go back through and touch up the entire trailer because of welding spatter and little marks that it makes. That way I can just touch up this little area and make it look nice and neat. So let's get going. Start by getting a couple tacks on here and there. See, look at that spatter, guys, all over the blanket. See that? That'd have been all over the whole trailer if I didn't cover it. So, they're cheap. They're only like 20 bucks. So they're very worthwhile to have. Save you from doing a lot of cleanup. I get a lot of comments from you guys that talk about flux core, and you say, well, I've only got a flux core welder, as though flux core is a bad thing. And I think a lot of times flux core gets a bad thing because of MIG. So people just assume that, well, you've got a MIG welder, it runs on gas, that it has to be better because a MIG welder costs more. Well, that's not true. It depends on what you're doing. Now, if you're working outside and you're doing the project, you're not going to be able to use a MIG welder, generally, without doing some extra steps, but there's nothing wrong with flux core wire. It's great for outdoors because you don't have to worry about shielding gas because it's self-shielded. It burns a little bit hotter. Yes, there is a little bit of cleanup, but self-shielded wire is pretty much very similar to like stick welding because you've got slag and you've got that whole process. But yeah, don't be ashamed to have a flux core welder, guys. That's what I started out with, and I use flux core a lot. I use it because I work outside a lot. I use it inside. It's just a good all-around thing. So don't be discouraged about flux core. Yeah, I think that matches in all right. So now I'll just let that dry, and then we can put that stand on there. But in the meanwhile, now we'll go out back, and we got to put them here. So I think I'm going to do something like that, just kind of like butt it right up against that piece of C-channel, and then that way when they rotate they'll go back like that. So that's what I'm doing next. I'm going to mark it out same way I did before. I'm also going to put on a little brace in behind there just to keep this edge so it doesn't flex. It's going to go something like that. So now we got all the legs on it. All I got to do is wire brush it and then put a quick coat of paint on it, and we'll be good to start building up our next piece, which is to get that sign mounted. Now we've got all the plates welded on, we've got everything painted. You can actually see that the trailer is actually supporting itself using these tongue jacks, and that's how it's actually going to be used when they send it out. So yeah, came out really good, and I'm real happy with how well that the color matched. I think it did a real good job. Blends in pretty well with the surrounding paint. You can see how here's the new paint, here's the existing paint. But yeah, I think it came out pretty good. So now we got to start working on building our frame that's going to hold up that sign. And that's going to do it for this week, guys, but stay tuned for next week's episode where we do a ton of cutting, welding, and fabrication. I'll give you a quick sneak peek right now. And this is just some of the stuff that you're going to see in the next episode. Lots of cutting, welding, fabricating. I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you're wondering what I'm working on before it even makes it up to YouTube, you guys can catch me on Facebook and on Instagram. I'll have links down below. I'm also updating my YouTube story pretty frequently, so you can catch me there as well. If you're wondering about any of the tools that I'm using, I'll have links down below. If this is something that you like, please don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. New videos every Friday. I will see you guys next week. Until then, take care, stay safe, see ya.